precisely to give local authorities the opportunity to look at those members of the community who are suffering from health problems, those people in disadvantaged areas. Introduction of bedroom tax and other benefit cuts. Well, hang on a minute. Introduction of bedroom tax? Well, have you forgotten who introduced the bedroom tax? The bedroom tax was introduced under the last Labour administration. If you put extension of the bedroom tax, then maybe you've got a point, but not introduction of the bedroom tax. Unprecedented cuts to local government funding. Well, what about North Dorset? I don't think they worry too much about the unprecedented cuts to local government funding. Yes, we are facing cuts. But again, as the leader of the council said on Saturday, many of these savings should have been done years ago. And one of the great advantages that's come out of the last few years is that we've started to realise the council the way we do things and have started to make savings which we should have made many years before. And finally, I've only got one more thing to cover, apparently, is the introduction of a tax cut for millionaires. Well, millionaires, and you probably know many of them because, you know, they're all supporting the Labour Party, but and they're doing so because under Labour they pay less tax. Under this government, millionaires, without exception, are paying more tax than they ever paid under a Labour government. It's not only income tax that they're now paying, but the increases in capital gains tax. And even at a lower level,
if you cannot be quiet, I will ask you to be
shame on you!
So please.
Shame on the lot of you! Laughing! The lot of you!
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So all I would say in conclusion is perhaps if you had taxed millionaires a little bit more when you were in office and you had controlled some of their activities in the City of London, we would not be in the situation that the country finds itself in today.
Councillor Kelly, you have the right to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I'll just have a few notes. I think I'll address the remarks exclusively related to Phil Davis as the leader of the council. I think it encapsulated what other members of the Labour group said. So, without criticising Phil, don't take it too personally. My initial response is to say, so does he really believe that the problems of financial exclusion started in May 2010? Because frankly, Phil, if you believe that, then it isn't me that's living in a parallel universe, it is you. And I said in my initial remarks that it was clear that these issues were very deep-rooted. It is sad, Mr. Mayor, that the leader and the other Labour contributors to the debate chose to go down the route of petty, yes, and I will say it, petty party political copy. Having said that, I welcome his commitment to look at the issues that I have raised, and I will monitor his progress at the appropriate time in appropriate future council meetings. But again, I noticed that Labour in their contributions has not made one single positive contribution or put forward one single idea to the debate that would contribute to dealing with problems of financial exclusion, apart from to try and gain party advantage. Mr. Mayor, it's my intention to rise above the name calling. Clearly, I can't advise the Council support the amendment because it contributes zero, zilch, to the problems that we face. But I will say to my group and to the opposition in general that whilst the Labour Party may go away, happy to have spent what could have been an important debate around helping people that are financially excluded, they've spent the debate with knocking copy on the government rather than local members. Despite the fact that they will go away, clearly they will use their votes to force through their stupid and silly amendment that contributes nothing. Despite the fact that it may be added to the end of the motion that they concede is a good one, I am still going to advise my group and the opposition that they should unanimously support the substantive so that the Council at least can get behind the positive ideas that they have put forward in the face of opposition from a party that is devoid of ideas.
We are now going to go to the vote. All those in favour of the amendment, please show. All those against?
And then for yourselves.
Yeah.
That was 36 for, 26 against. One abstention. I'm addressing the full council. Are there any other amendments? Now we go to the substantive motion as amended. All those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you. I move on to the second notice of motion in place.
Absolutely bugger all.
That is in relation to a notion based on bedroom tax.
Yes. We would like to speak about this from the floor of the chamber.
Afraid you can't.
Well, then we'll
This is
up here.
This is a meeting held in public, not a public meeting.
We'll speak to it up
You
here.
have the right early on to address the committee. The council does have a position where
We will speak
members
to it
of the
up here.
public can ask questions of
We will
council.
speak to it up
That
here.
was not taken up at the time. I must ask you
Not made
to
available.
listen to the debate. I'm afraid you
We don't
cannot
want to
take part
listen
in
to a
it.
load of rubbish.
Councillor Davis, would you like to move it?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move our motion bedroom tax. This motion highlights the impact of the rules that were introduced in April of this year by the Coalition to restrict the amount of benefit people can claim for each bedroom if you rent your home. Mr. Mayor, a measure which ought to be an attempt to deal with over-occupation in the social renting sector and to reduce the escalating housing benefit bill has become one of the most hated pieces of legislation since the poll tax. Mr. Mayor, this is increasing poverty, leading to family breakups, and is likely to actually result in decreases in housing benefits. Mr. Mayor, the bedroom tax has failed because it's the wrong answer to the problem. The way to reduce the housing benefit bill is not to penalise poor people, but to build more affordable homes. Yes. Especially in our more deprived communities. But the main source of funding for doing this, which was introduced under the last government, the Housing Market Renewal Programme, was unceremoniously cut by the Coalition when it was barely halfway through alternative properties in many parts of the country and flies in the face of the practice of governments of all colours who for many years encouraged councils like ours to build properties big enough for families. We're now seeing the consequences of this absolutely crazy policy. 96% of people affected by the bedroom tax have nowhere to move to. 50,000 people affected by the bedroom tax have fallen behind on rent and face eviction. Families are uprooted as they are forced to leave neighbourhoods and their support networks. More people are having to rely on food banks and borrow money from loan sharks. Registered social landlords suffering a loss of income which threaten their very viability. More pressure put on local authorities to deal with growing numbers of homeless people and huge stress being placed in our staff in one-stop shops on a daily basis who have to deal with the growing numbers of people who are absolutely desperate because they cannot make ends meet due to cuts from other benefits as well as the bedroom tax. There is a total lack of clarity and confusion about what constitutes a bedroom and the grounds upon which you may be exempt from the bedroom tax. This is particularly the case with regard to...
But you decided that.
Many of whom are being
The council's decided that.
this tax as a result of courts becoming clogged up with cases about individual family circumstances. Ironically, in the long term, the bedroom tax will is forcing more people to rent in the private sector, which will simply increase the housing benefit bill to this country. Now, one of the main responses by the coalition has been to say that sufficient funding has been provided to councils like ours in the form of discretionary housing payments to help people who have had their housing benefits cut. But we know from a report to Cabinet just last week that this funding is totally inadequate. Last year, Last year, Mr. Mayor, we spent nearly £500,000 on claimants just from the private rental sector, and this is expected to remain at that level. Towards all people affected by the bedroom tax in this borough would cost £3 million a year, so 917,000 with the possibility of a modest amount of extra money, which we will have to bid for, is nowhere near enough to meet demand. Mr. Mayor, it simply beggars belief that the coalition and those who support them cannot see that the way to deal with the bedroom tax is not to tinker around with exemptions, definitions, discretionary payments, but to get rid of it completely now. I'm proud that the leader of the Labour Party, Ed Miliband, said that one of the first actions of an incoming Labour government will be to repeal the bedroom tax. In the meantime, Mr. Mayor, if the government refused to scrap this iniquitous tax, our motion proposes two immediate actions. Firstly, that in addition to the £100,000 we delivered in our budget to enhance help for people on low income who are affected by the bedroom tax, we should allocate an additional £25,000 from the council's current underspend to enhance advice services. And secondly, that we call on the government for an immediate suspension of the bedroom tax to allow for an independent assessment of its impact on the most deprived parts of the country, an exercise that should have happened before this was introduced. Finally, Mr. Mayor, we will not be supporting the amendment moved by either the Liberal Democrats or the Conservatives. In terms of the Liberal Democrats, I have to say I find it totally hypocritical that in their motion they denounce the bedroom tax as being damaging to poor people. However, they are again unwilling to make any criticism of their own party who supported the Conservatives in passing this legislation in Parliament, while at the same time giving a tax cut to millionaires. Mr. Mayor, the Lib Dems had the power to stop this awful policy happening. They have failed, and I believe that they will pay the price at the next election. I so move.
Why won't Wirral Council define what a bedroom is?
Before I call the movement second for the amendment, can I ask Councillor George Davis to formally second? Thank you.
One of the contributors could answer that. Why won't Wirral Council define what a bedroom is?
I'm sorry.
People are liable.
Sir, I've told you once already, if you insist on continuing in that form, I will ask for you to be removed. Please allow the debate to take place. Thank you. Councillor Gilchrist.
and therefore have a picture of just what the implications are with over 900 families in Burnett and Tranmere, 500 nearly in 900 in St James, 500 in Burnett and Tranmere, over 400 in Leeso and 400 in Rock Ferry affected by the rules, and therefore completely understand that there are problems because there aren't houses, there aren't one-bed flats for people to go to as alternatives. As Magenta has made it clear in correspondence with me in September, they have a high proportion of tenants, 552 tenants occupying houses, under-occupying as it's called, houses with 2 or more bedrooms, and that they have a growing arrears problem. So I recognise that there are problems for our housing associations. The question is the council going to work out a course of action or a lobbying mechanism that actually changes the way things are, or we're going to carry on crying about things? I spent some time researching things, Mr Mayor, and I've studied the correspondence with Lloyd Freud, the Welfare Minister, and most recently his correspondence with Oldham Council, and in particular, he points out the housing benefit bill, but he said that it was, this benefit change was to encourage mobility within the social rented sector. We recognise locally, Mr Mayor, that that isn't possible. He also went on to say that tenants could fund any shortfall themselves. We recognise that that isn't possible in the Wirral circumstances. He went on, Mr Mayor, on the 5th page of his letter, to say that measures will be monitored and evaluated over a 2-year period. We happen to believe there is enough evidence, in our case, if the council could get its acts together, to say that there is enough evidence to say there are problems in Wirral which we should address. And as it's been heard earlier, many tenants would like to move to smaller, cheaper accommodation. We've heard it doesn't exist. So I'm certainly prepared to say that we should work on a resolution, on evidence that will deal with the situation. And I also have been asking about how much discussion in how much payment there is, whether there is enough coming into us, whether there will be enough. It may be, and I know that when Vader was mentioned earlier, she is now moved into a position where she could convey the problems that we face to members of government, which I'm prepared to do. We can sit down as party leaders and work out a scheme and work out suggested changes. I don't believe that saying something should be suspended like that will receive favour, and I do believe that setting out the problems and seeking solutions should. I don't find, however, that the Conservative amendment which is put before us affects things usefully. I regard it as complacent because it says that there was the impact assessment. That impact assessment just hasn't identified the problems, and I believe ought to be dealt with, and I believe we should move forward rather than accept the Conservative amendment, Mr Mayor.
Before I call any speakers, Councillor Campbell, would you like to formally second that? Thank you.
Mr Mayor, could I just declare interest with my employer on the
Yes, certainly. Yes, and the Constitution states we deal with this particular affairs. Not that dealt with, we then move on to the steps. Medals. Please read your Constitution. Right, Councillor Smith. Sorry. Right, Walter, okay. Please make sure you keep your comments to the limited time.
Mainly to address Councillor Green's amendment.
We're not dealing with that one yet. We're dealing with the Liberal Democrats amendment. Please address your comments to the Liberal Democrats amendment.
It might be convenient and less confusing if Jeffrey is allowed to put his amendment on the table.
Sorry, Councillor Kelly, I am working to the Council's Constitution, which every member here agreed to. It was agreed to by a majority, okay? I understand. Now, the thing is, I know members are still trying to work in the old way of doing things, but that doesn't work anymore. We changed the whole constitution when I became the mayor. It's the wish of the council to do so, and we will continue. We will do so as the constitution states. No. Councillor Thomas, would you like to speak?
The Tory Lib Dem coalition has already shown it's a government return. So why can't it perform what would be the most popular U-turn of the law and scrap the hated bedroom tax? How is it seemingly so desperate to cling on to such an ill-conceived, ill-thought-out and grossly unfair policy? Why is it seemingly so hell-bent on inflicting as much misery as possible on the poorest sections of society? Labour has said it will scrap the tax if it is elected in 2015, but damage continues to be done on a basis, and we need to see it vanished as soon as possible. The evidence of the tax failure is all around. The Liverpool Echo last week reported that housing association staff in Liverpool had to receive training from the Samaritans in how to handle suicidal callers. The Echo also revealed that housing associations have seen the number of empty three-bedroom homes double since the tax was brought in. On the 1st of August this year, again, the Echo reported that by the end of August 2013, rent arrears showed an increase of 2 million over the previous year. Is the coalition merely being bloody-minded, or does it actually sincerely believe in this crazy, unpopular policy? Perhaps right-wing Tories like Esther McVeigh can, and that is no surprise, but I cannot believe that fair-minded Liberal Democrat councillors and MPs will continue to support a tax that inflicts such misery on the poorest sections of society. Incidentally, according to figures released on Friday by Revenue and Customs, the amount of tax lost through non-payment and avoidance increased last year to 35 billion. If we dealt with that tax gap, we would get rid of the deficit. I ask all members to support the Labour motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think tonight I'll do the unusual routine of irritating both main groups in Town Hall. So if you can bear with me on that one. Mr. Mayor, we'll start with... Thank you. We'll start with some of the history to this, which certainly the Labour Party opposite seems to have forgotten. If we go back to 2001, Labour's Minister for Welfare in the Department of Work and Pensions oversaw 400 in the space of the first...
Two wrongs make a right, Doody.
Oh, do you want to let me finish?
Two wrongs make a right.
Please. Do you want to let me finish? Or do you want to get elected to come down here and speak?
Pardon?
Please, do not banter. I will debate on the floor of the chamber. Please carry on. In the first 4 years of last Labour government, the Labour Party oversaw 400 changes to housing benefits. Amongst those was the introduction of an under-occupation pilot, which Malcolm Wicks, the late housing minister, the welfare minister, in 1957-2001 said, and I'm quoting from Hansard, the under-occupation pilot encourages housing benefit recipients living in under-occupied social housing to move to smaller and cheaper accommodation in order to make more efficient use of the housing stock. That was a Labour minister. 3 years later, after that pilot was introduced, the same minister said in the House of Commons, we hope to implement a flat rate housing benefit system in the social sector. When he was questioned further, the Labour minister said, tenants whose rent is higher than their local payment, so in other words, it exceeds what they were receiving from the state, they will be expected to make up the difference with their landlord. There will not be a hardship payment to tenants whose rent is higher than their local housing payment. Tenants will have the choice to shop around and look for
by the leader of the Liberal Democrats. The new Shadow Secretary of State for Welfare in the Labour Party, Rachel Reeves, has promised that a future Labour government will be even tougher on welfare than the Conservative Party. One issue, Mr Mayor, that has not been addressed, whether you hate the government or whether you perceive to be hating the people in social housing, whichever side of the fence you sit on. I have to say, Mr Mayor, the one side of the fence that has got off scot-free so far are the housing associations. Under the housing associations, under the laws that were introduced by the Labour Party, the last Labour government, large numbers of council houses were transferred to housing associations which borrowed money on interest rates that were currently 5 times the current level of interest rates, and they were given the and the Labour Party gave those housing associations free rein to increase rents and thereby housing benefit bill by inflation as measured by CPI plus 0.5% plus £2 a week, regardless of what happened to interest rates. As we know, interest rates have collapsed in the last 5 years. As a result, housing associations are making millions more in terms of this. Mr Mayor, housing associations, if they wanted to, could have reduced their rents with no impact on the original budgets when the housing associations were set up. Instead, they have chosen not to. Indeed, Mr Mayor, there is anecdotal evidence that housing associations are leaving people affected by the bedroom tax in 3-bedroom properties, saying that unless there is a 1-bedroom property, they will not move them to a 2-bedroom property because of the impact it will have on their rental income. At the same time, housing associations are not subject to the Freedom of Information Act, so it is very difficult to find out what level of balances the housing associations now have in their banks. Mr Mayor, in principle, the cost of the bedroom tax, we remember, I think it was earlier this year, the government reduced the top rate of tax, saying that the cost of collecting a higher rate of tax exceeded the money that was being brought in. Mr Mayor, this is the part that probably now will pay off my group, Mr Mayor, in that the cost, I believe, of the bedroom tax outweighs the money that it brings in the money it saves. And Mr Mayor, I have to say now that the arguments that the government used then to reduce the top rate of tax...
How many bedrooms have you got, Bob?
I've got 2 bedrooms and I don't pay housing benefits. Mr Mayor, the same argument that was used by the government to reduce the top rate of tax could be used equally to get rid of the bedroom tax. And 2 parts in particular to Labour's motion, and I'll finish on this one. Ignoring the politics of it, ignoring Councillor Davis's political comments, which I found very enlightening, but I realise the gallery is full, so therefore we have to say those sort of things. But Mr Mayor, 2 points in the Labour motion that are worthy of agreement. One, the impact it has on people who are having to move away from their support base, people who lived in properties for 30, 40 years and have been removed out of their communities where their family and friends are. And also, Mr Mayor, the point that Councillor Davis has made, both Councillor Davis has made in this notice of motion, where they talk about
the one-bedroom tax.
Government of all parties, I'm sorry, I'm being interrupted, Mr Mayor. Government of all parties have not built houses that are suitable for people's needs. We've continued to build 3-bedroom properties, even when some people didn't want a 3-bedroom property. And Mr Mayor, for that reason, in spite of the politics in this motion, I will be voting with the Labour group tonight.
Councillor Adrian Jones.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. May I, Mr Mayor, in a spirit of cross-party unity, say how delightful it is to see so many Wallacey Conservatives here today. I hope they're feeling much better than they were on Saturday, because none of them were well enough to attend the Council's annual conference, and I felt terribly sorry for their group leader, who was like Billy No-Mates. The entire remainder of Wirral. And now, Mr Mayor, to make the unthinkable. Let's just imagine that a Labour-led collaboration government had introduced the bedroom tax that we now see before us. Imagine, Mr Mayor, what the reaction would be from the benches opposite. Does anyone imagine that even for a moment, that if the Labour government had introduced this measure, the usual culprits sitting opposite wouldn't have bellowed their usual protests, wouldn't they have been shedding crocodile tears, and because they would be saying, wouldn't they be saying, you could see the words coming from their mouths, they'd have been saying our heartless government had betrayed the weakest and most vulnerable in our society.
Yeah, they've done before.
Well, that's exactly what their government has just done. And I'm delighted, Mr. Mayor, that Ed Miliband's declaration that Labour will repeal it, and that is, if it hasn't already collapsed,